Ready? Welcome everyone to our special meeting of council for the 2019 to 2023 five-year financial plan. I'm going to start by recognizing that we are on the territories of the Hoopachesit and Sishot First Nations. City Clerk, I think we have correspondence.
We have two late items, Madam Mayor. Under 1F, a report from the Economic Development Manager, and 2A will be a letter from Roland Smith.
Okay, with those two items added in, would somebody like to move adoption of our agenda? All in favor? Carried. And we have under minutes, the minutes of the special meeting of council held February 4th, 2019 at 1 p.m. Would somebody like to move adoption?
So move that, Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. And on to item C, and the first, so we have a series of reports with responses to questions, and I'm going to just go with item D first. The report from the Mechanical Services Superintendent. Wait, if you want to come forward. Thank you. So if you want to just give us a brief overview for council.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The previous vehicles that we do have running right now is the Chrysler Pacifica van, which is a plug-in hybrid unit, as well as we just received about 8 months ago the Mitsubishi, and that's a plug-in hybrid as well. They have been working great for us so far. No issues with them at all. Basically, they haven't come up to the first service yet, so we have no expenses on either of them. And so right now, the mileage on them, they are averaging about 3.5 liters per 100 kilometers. So they're using a lot of the electric power right off the bat to start off with. Right now, the van, I think, has got 4,400 or 4,450 kilometers on it. And the Mitsubishi is running at about 3,340 kilometers usage so far in the last 8 to 10 months.
Okay. Council questions? Councillor Corbeil?
There's a significant difference, $10,000 apparently, between plug-in and non-plug-in. What's your opinion on the difference?
Well, the difference is basically the technology today. The plug-in hybrid uses lithium-ion battery, and it is large and heavy, and the big expenses in the battery itself could range anywhere between $7,000 to $8,000 difference, whereas just a regular hybrid is using a much smaller regular size car battery. So the plug-in hybrids, the plug-in hybrid vehicles basically run on electric power for starting off and running the vehicle up into a certain kilometer or a certain load, whether you're going up a hill quickly or not, before the gas engine may assist it for usage. But it'll always use the electrical side of the hybrid first before requiring the use of the gas.
So in your opinion, based on what this would likely be used for, does it make sense to have the plug-in versus the non-plug-in?
Having these ones so new to us right now, they are both, the two that we have are very efficient. They do use less fuel than they would on a hybrid. A regular hybrid vehicle, we just gave examples of the Toyota in the report of the hybrid and compared to the Mitsubishi that we do have. The hybrid, the Toyota hybrid, they're saying it's going to be a combined fuel mileage of about 6 liters per 100 kilometers. Whereas we're averaging right now 3.5 with the two vehicles that we have. So over time, we probably have it between 10 to 12, 14 years that we would have these vehicles. So there's a lot of savings over the years between the two. But they're both great vehicles. Either one would be good.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Washington?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Are both of them available to be purchased locally, or do we have to go to town?
No. The Mitsubishi is, of course, the dealer is in Nanaimo, and but the Toyota is here at our local, is locally here.
Councillor Paulson, did you have a question?
Actually, Councillor
been
Cornwell
answered?
just answered the question about the $10,000 difference.
Okay, wonderful. Any other questions? Councillor Poon?
So if we were to go for the Mitsubishi, would we have to service the vehicle in Nanaimo?
We would do our own servicing here. They would only require to go there under warranty issues or any recalls.
Okay. I am seeing no more questions for you. I think you're free to leave.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the report. Okay, starting to go in order again now. Item A, we have a report from Director of Parks, Recreation and Heritage for the skate shop renovations.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the report in front of you, I would say, suggest is fairly self-explanatory, but just a note that under the replacement dust collection, I did confirm with staff that the existing unit is non-repairable. So if we were looking at exploring this item further, we would require to replace the dust collection system.
Okay. Councillor, are there any questions about this report? Councillor Paulson?
Maybe you'd like to comment a little more on the replacement dust collection and what that is actually about. That, if I remember correctly, and I've sharpened a few pair of skates, that's actually inside the skate sharpening room, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that's
And in the skate sharpening process, there's a fair amount of very fine dust that comes off, and it's steel base. This system has never worked since the building was built, and I think it's past due for safety reasons more than anything else, and health reasons for the staff. I've come out of that room just spitting up black and blowing my nose, and I know you use face masks and stuff, but that doesn't cover it all. Anyway, just a thought and an observation, having been in that building for over 10 years, and that's never been a good functioning system. We've got a vacuum cleaner hooked up to the skate machine right now.
so, Madam Mayor, Councillor Paulson's correct in that the replacement, the dust collection unit is meant for, of course, to exhaust the steel filings that come off the skate blades as they're sharpened. And so, for all intents and purposes, we're discussing more of a hood vent type system, something that you'd have in, I guess the closest comparison might be into a commercial kitchen. And so Councillor Paulson is correct as far from a health and safety standpoint, that the dust collection is a critical component of that space. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, easy. Thank you very much for the report. Item B is a report from the Chief Administrative Officer dated February 13th, responses to questions from Leslie Wallerius, CAO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We've received a question from Leslie Wallerius regarding, had some questions in that report, in a letter from her, questions about the budget process. There's a report in your agenda package from me responding to those questions. We will send a copy of my report to Ms. Wallerius. If you like, I can read the report or I can answer your questions.
Council, are there any questions about the information? No questions.
Thank you.
Item C is a report from our fire chief dated February 7th, responses to questions received from Peter Finch in a letter dated February 5th, 2019. Similar here, just from a letter. Are there questions on this one, though? Councillor Corbeil?
Just so I'm clear, is this more of a regional district issue than a city of Port Alberni issue? I'm thinking about, most of the forest is outside the city limits.
Yeah, of course, the regional district issues eventually impact the cities. So being kind of part of the broader scale, it does impact the cities. So a lot of the recommendations in the previous report did pertain, or the previous report from BA Blackwell pertained to recommendations to the regional district, but eventually that impacts us as well.
Councillor Paulson.
Just an observation in the response here, and I noticed that there's many references to the mutual aid. So obviously the city and the outlying fire departments would have to work in harmony in this area, and it's good to see that planning is moving forward, and I would suspect that you and Mr. Gilday will be working very closely together over the next 6 months to a year.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I see no other questions. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
And item E is a report from the Director of Finance dated February 12th, 2019, providing tax rate scenarios from 3% to 8% and the effects on the average single-family residence. Council, are there any questions on this report? So just of note right now, with what is currently in our budget, without adding anything in or taking anything out, we are currently at a 4.5% increase to the average single-family home.
So that's $70.72.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 86. That's $86.20 increase to the average single-family home currently. Okay.
That's 5.3%.
4.3 average to the single-family home. 5.3 increase to our actual budget. We've got our clarification happened here.
Thank you.
Okay, any questions or comments on this report? Okay, seeing none. Would somebody like to move receipt of all of the reports? Oh, sorry. We have item F from our economic development manager. And we'll get you to come up and explain this one, just because it is a late item, so it's not in our agenda.
My apologies to council for the fact that it is late. We were waiting for everybody to weigh in on it, and we received the full report from Aquila on Thursday late, so we were trying to make sure we'd covered all the items off. So I've divided out the expenses that I think are attributable only to the cruise ship visits. And in other words, we wouldn't have extra staff on an ordinary Saturday cleaning the toilets. We wouldn't be bringing porta potties in, that kind of thing. And then there are some other expenditures that we think represent improvements to Harbor Key that residents and visitors as well as cruise ship passengers and crews would enjoy. And so the estimate of costs in the first category, $13,250, and the estimate of costs in the second category are $22,500. Now, I did put in there a placeholder for painting of the Marine Building, which is the building that houses the shops from Salmonberry's round through to the donut shop. I think the placeholder is light. Dan Savard from Swept Away Inn told me last week that he would go to work on trying to raise the funds for the painting. And my impression is that he won't be able to raise all of the funds, and that we'll be on the hook for something. So as I said, it includes a placeholder of $10,000, and I think that's light if we're actually successful. But I will be working with Dan over the next few weeks to actually try and pull that donation off. So I deliberately didn't cost out the items because I didn't, as the expression is, I didn't want to bring council down into the weeds.
Okay. Are there any questions? Councillor Paulson.
I guess this is a decision we have to make, but the 13,250, whose budget is that going to come out of?
We're going to add it into a budget.
I know, but whose departmental budget is that coming out of, that we're adding into and taking out of?
The costs would be distributed between some portions, so some parks and recreation, some public works, but also some private sector, for example, porta potty rentals. So it's going to a variety of different places. I am the city's point person on this file. So I go to the cruise ship committee meetings and I come back with requests that I pass on to the CAO, and from there they fan out.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on this report? I'll just add that I actually had something on my list to talk to you about anyways, of a meeting that I had a few days ago of somebody who wanted to organize a Paint the Town Uptown volunteer event, and I bet he would be interested in helping with this instead. They were going to fundraise some of the money, and then they were going to look into encouraging building owners to apply to the facade improvement program, and they would contribute the labor for some of it. So this could cross over somewhat. So I will put you in touch with him or Dan.
That would be great. I know that Dan has already reached out to a couple of the stores in the community that stock paint, but we're trying to go one level up and get to a manufacturer and have them donate. And we would welcome that. To this point in time, we haven't considered any city-owned buildings for the facade improvement program. And given what I know about the applications that are going in, I suggest that we hold the line on that. But we'd be very happy to have additional help.
For sure.
That's great. Thank you.
Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I understand that the city is in possession of a wood sign that was formerly at the visitor center that has been refurbished by the city and is in storage somewhere. Has there been any consideration but taking that out of storage and putting up some place for photo opportunities for the cruise ships and tourists that come to our community?
There's been discussion. There's been no decisions, and that's not reflected in the budget that you have in front of you.
Okay. Yep.
Just one more comment. I was hoping there would be a little bit more in refurbishing Harbor Key, so I'm a little disappointed.
Fair enough. I mean, what the approach that we took was that Aquila are the experts on what is really required to make port presentable to passengers and crew. And what I really liked about them was they were conscious of the fact that we had 3 cruise ships this year, and they're very cost conscious and said, we don't want to see you guys spend a whole bunch of money. Yes, we want to see you put out the welcome mat. We want to see that the passengers have a safe and exciting experience. And it really keeps coming back to this class or demographic, rather, is supposed to be more adventurous in nature, And so we're going to try and make sure that we cover that off. And I'm with you on Harbor Key. The paint dates back decades, not years.
Thank you very much. Oh, Councillor Paulson.
Just on the bright side, and it's the clock tower project, and the first cruise ship may be arriving. The paints might still be wet, as the CAO said, but on the bright side, I think that that's a great project, and I have a feeling it's going to become a real centerpiece. And I'd like to thank the CAO for working with First Nations on getting that project moving forward, and I'm excited to see that done. So, thank you.
For sure.
Us too.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr.
Yep,
Deacon. Would
thank
somebody
you.
like to move receipt of our reports 1A through F? Is there a seconder? All in favor? Carried. So our next item is report number 2 from the Director of Finance, the 2016 installation project from the solar installation project, from the Carbon Trust Reserve Fund. So we have a report in our agendas. Council, is there any questions on it? Councillor Poon.
So what was this intended for, this solar installation, and where would it have gone?
CAO.
Madam Mayor, this project goes back a ways to probably the early days of the last council. There was that council desired to see a solar project, and we had the city had undertaken some work to look at feasibility of from a solar perspective of putting solar panels on city buildings. So we had a report generated that showed which buildings the city owns, how much power they use, and so how much generation capacity could they utilize. And then in a subsequent year, council populated a solar project with $100,000 from Carbon Fund for the purpose of building out one of those projects in that report. Then we did some extensive work on all the buildings listed in the report to see if they were suitable structurally to hold a solar array. And we found that with, I believe, 2 exceptions, none of the buildings were deemed appropriate to support that kind of load on the roof, because the buildings are older and they don't meet current code, and you have to think about wind and all these things that engineers tell us. And the buildings that were suitable needed some modifications or had limitations. So in the end, council recognized that wasn't going to be a path that would work. So council then redirected the project toward the funding toward a solar incentive program and directed staff to come back with an incentive program that would help encourage people to include solar on their own homes. Staff never got anywhere really on that project. So the term of that council expired. That project is still on the work list. We haven't done any work on it. So if council desires to continue down that path, we will continue. It'll stay on our work plan and we will get to it. If council desires to, if you're not committed to that project and you want to collapse the project, you can, that $100,000 in carbon fund funding can then be made available. It'll return basically to it's still in the Carbon Trust Fund, but it won't be earmarked. So it'll be available for redeployment, if you like. And the Director of Finance, now that I've given that butchered answer, the Director of Finance is here. She can give you more input in terms of the financial end of that.
Okay. Are there further questions? Councillor Washington?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Being of the council of the past, I think the whole solar thing came about when there was rumors that there was a speculation that there was going to be somebody coming into Port Alberni and actually building the panels here, and that's why the council of the day got so excited about it. And of course, that never happened. So that's sort of why it sort of lost its interest. So just to let the other folks know that was probably the reason why we were so excited about it back then.
Yeah, I think that's good background, and the fact that there was, an expectation of jobs coming from that as well was a big focus of why I think this project was sort of looked at. Councillor Paulson?
Nope, I have nothing to say.
Okay. Councillor Haggard, any comments? Councillor Corbeil? Okay, so we do have a motion attached here, and it is specific at the end of it to allocating $48,000 to purchase the hybrid vehicle. If I understand correctly from the report we had earlier, it's $48,000 if we want to go for the Mitsubishi, $38,000 for the Toyota hybrid plug-in, or I think I'm correct on that. Okay.
Madam Mayor, I think it was, I could be wrong, I think it was 38,000 for the hybrid, 48 for a pluggable.
Yes, okay,
Yes.
great. So would somebody like to make the motion here? Sure. Councillor Poon.
I'll move that the report from Director of Finance dated February 13th, 2019 be received, and Council for City of Port Alberni cancel the proposed solar installation project, direct the $100,000 funding back into the Carbon Trust Reserve Fund, and allocate $38,000 to the purchase of a hybrid vehicle for the Engineering and Public Works Department.
I'll second that.
Okay, questions or comments? Councillor Washington?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm feeling just slightly uncomfortable for the moment, being the fact it's a Toyota, and both my daughter and son-in-law work for the local dealership.
You want to get out of the room?
Yeah. If it,
It's not too late. We appreciate that.
Madam Mayor, if I may?
Yes.
This is not a decision about purchasing any vehicle. You're just allocating funds for a vehicle, and it's not determined what vehicle that will be, or
I
that
would
will
say
come at a later date.
I would say that if we are allocating $38,000, we are determining what vehicle we are going to buy. So it is your personal call, but that's right. Thank you, Councillor Washington. And I think that it is an appropriate time for us to determine if we want to, if we should be right now deciding whether to decide which type of vehicle. We have the option of certainly allocating just the $38,000, which would drive us toward the hybrid. Or we certainly could allocate $48,000 and let staff decide which one they think is best. It just comes down to if council wants to make that decision or leave it to staff. So we'll open that up to conversation. Any comments? Councillor Paulson.
I support the motion as it's changed, and I really, when we're talking about procurement, and we have talked about this quite a bit, I'm not sure if we have the right to put in some wording here dealing with purchasing locally, if it falls within the budget.
CAO, is that necessary, or I mean,
is that just
we
standard
typically
practice?
look to purchase locally whenever possible.
Madam Mayor, I think we could hear from the Director of Finance on purchasing policy. It might be helpful.
Madam Mayor, the purchasing policy does allow for a $1,000 advantage for a local bidder. Like if they're $1,000 higher than an out-of-towner, we will go with the local $1,000 cushion. So we do, we shop locally wherever we can in practice, as well as it's in the policy.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, great. Councillor Haggard, do you have any comments?
I think we should let staff make the decision. They're the ones that's going to be using it. They're the experts. I buy cars on color and their seats are heated.
I have nothing to contribute to what type of vehicle we choose either. Councillor Poon.
I think we should go for the Toyota over the Mitsubishi because any warranty work will stay local.
Okay. Councillor Corbeil, any questions or comments? Okay, so at this point we have a motion to cancel the proposed solar installation project, direct the $100,000 back into the Carbon Reserve Fund, and allocate $38,000, which would leave us enough money to buy the hybrid vehicle. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay. Would somebody like to alert Councillor Washington? Thank you. Okay, item 2A, we have a letter from Roland Smith. So the letter is regarding the Grandview Road project. Would somebody like to move receipt?
So moved. I'll second that.
Okay, are there any questions or comments? Okay, all in favor? Carried. Okay. That brings us to item 3, which is our projects option list. And I know that there has been some talk among councillors to possibly go back through in some capacity our operating budget or our capital budget. I would suggest that we start with the options list, and then at the end of that, if we feel we need to go back into those, we can continue through that process as well. Assuming nobody opposes that. Okay. Assuming nobody opposes that, let me find the options list. So I think, Ron, it's so at the end of our agenda, we do have it updated, yeah, in order. So we'll work off of this order. Yeah. I think it's further down still. There's another copy where it's just the ones that we've included. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. 89. So before we start this discussion, I want to just add to it the items that came forward in the Economic Development Manager's report, which was $13,250 for cruise ship, and then a further $22,500. So we'll add those to the options list. CAO, there were no other items in reports that needed to possibly add it in, were they? I don't think so. Okay. Okay, so just so the council is aware, if there was anything else that we wanted to add in that we had not previously added in from the initial options list, those won't be in here. So if there's anything that you were intending to make a motion to add that we hadn't already put in, now would be the time. Councillor Paulson?
Thank you. I'd like to go back to page 87, and that goes back to Director Thorpe's report in the multiplex skate shop upgrade. I would like to, just for consideration of our group here, to put in the $2,400 for the dust collector system.
Great, so we'll add that to the end of the options list. Councillors, anything else that you'd like to add in off of the options list before we work through just what's already on there, approved? I'm seeing no one, so. Okay, so starting at the beginning of page 89, the first option we have already included in our budget is the bylaw security enhancement program. It's $25,000. That's a matching program, and that would be coming from general. That's currently included in our budget. Council, is there any desire to change that? Seeing none. No, so to clarify, the $25,000 that's already currently in the budget, or sorry, currently being out for allocation, is from our 2018 budget. So this is to add in another cycle. Councillor Poon?
Can we have some indication as to how popular this program has been so far, and is it oversubscribed or
It is new, but we'll ask our manager of bylaw to come up and just comment on that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The program is going to close its first round in 2 days. And just in reviewing the general applications that come in, I can say there's been an overwhelming response in regards to the program, with a lot of positive feedback from the community that this is being offered.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, so seeing no suggestion to change anything, we're going to move on to the City Hall generator. So I believe that program or that project already has $60,000 allocated from, I think, 2016. And we have $30,000 further coming this year because the project is a bit, it has increased. And that is coming from IRF. Councillor Washington?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was outside, but the 100,000 funding back from the Carbon Trust Reserve, we can't use that for anything with the generator, can we, now that we've freed up that funds?
Is the generator allowable under the Carbon Trust? No. Okay. It makes electricity. Doesn't reduce greenhouse gases. That was a stretch. Gray area. Thank you. Any comments or desire to make any changes to this one? Seeing none. Okay, so that moves us to the fire department. We have the fire hall door access hardware, $5,000, and that's coming from general. Any questions, comments, or changes on this one? Councillor Poon?
Maybe I should have asked this earlier, but what is the access hardware and why do we need it? Why don't we use keys?
Why don't we use keys? Come on up.
So the access hardware is just a fob that allows us to get into the doors. It's old technology and it's starting to fail. So pretty soon we're going to have to do a window replacement line item for $5,000 if we keep on losing access points. So, but in all seriousness, there's been failures with a number of different access points. So this is just to get us back in the door so we can respond. You could use manual keys. Sure, we could issue those. The problem with manual keys, this is outside of this purvey, but if you lose one key, then you have to rekey the whole building, issue new keys. There's a great expense with that. So more and more people are going to fobs so that one fob goes missing, you just deactivate that fob.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, moving on. Policing, we have the first one, add back previous reduction of 1 member. Seeing no conversation. Item 2 is community policing coordinator, 114,000. Any comments or questions on this one? Okay, moving on, transportation services. We have dealt with the first one, which is the new vehicle for the director of engineering. Councillor Washington, we have dealt with that one. You weren't in the room, just to update you. 38,000, I believe. And moving on, we have the street lighting upgrade on main roads, $50,000. Any questions or comments on this one? Councillor Paulson?
Just for placeholding, I would suggest we take this out for this year.
Okay. Comments on that? Was that a motion? Sounded like a motion. Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Seeing nobody wanting to talk, I'm going to call the question on if we want to take that, remove that from the budget for 2019. All in favor? Carried. Okay, moving on to paving. We have Bird Street, 16th Avenue to Estevan, $60,000. I will comment that somebody got a flat tire on this in the pothole over the weekend. The potholes have gotten substantially worse the last few days. And I think they have been fixed up a bit today, which is fantastic. But road definitely getting substantially worse. Moving on, we have additional paving and road repairs, $100,000. Councillor Paulson?
This is a fairly large dollar figure. I wonder if we just have clarification on what additional paving and road repairs are. Gather road repairs would be pothole repairs but maybe we could have just a little clarification on what comprises that 100,000.
Mm-hmm.
There's my guy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To answer the question, it's pretty much an undetermined scope at this point. I think I mentioned a potential scenario like the state of the road out in front of the hospital. I mean, we have many smaller areas that could benefit from this money. Yeah, road repairs would be, you know, if you know, when the frost comes out of the ground, we actually have frost in the ground as we speak, and when that comes out, I mean, there'll be new areas that pop apart like popcorn. So yeah, I mean, it'll give us a little leg up in dealing with some of those areas, as opposed to all coming out of operations. So.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, seeing no desire to change that. Moving on to Storm, we have Montrose 6th Avenue to 9th Avenue, $75,000, with $37,500 coming from gas tax. Okay, moving on, we have 8th Avenue, Dogwood to Cedarwood, $65,000, coming from general. Okay. Moving on, traffic light upgrades, traffic signal head LED upgrades, $20,000. Councillor Corbeil?
Could I just ask the question, is that something that has to be done this year, or could that be put off until next year?
Yeah, again, it's something that's recommended by our electricians that do the maintenance on those signal heads. We could stage it over 2 years if you wanted to. It's a matter of purchasing new cards. It's all electronic now, right, as opposed to ballast. There's cards in those things, so we could do that over 2 years, or we could do it all in 1 year. Could put it off a year if you wanted to, but it is, again, it's sort of a maintenance item. As these things die, we'll have to do them all sort of a one-off. So they're recommending that we replace them all and get ahead of the issues that it might cause. So.
Councillor Poon?
Can we perhaps replace them on an as-needed basis?
Yeah, absolutely we could, but it would cost more, and you've got the downtime and the issues with those lights when that happens, right? So.
For sure. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Any desire to change this one? Seeing none, moving on. Okay, moving on to the next page. Under Works Other, we have the Grandview Walkway, 385 meters, additional cost for ditch infill and paved shoulder. So this one, just as a reminder, we have $100,000 already in the budget allocated from 2018, but has not been spent. So this project is a total of $125,000. Any questions or comments? Councillor Haggard?
Is there any way that we could incorporate some safety into this stretch of road without actually spending $125,000, like to slow traffic down to make it safer, like speed bumps, or would it be more cost effective? Or
Unfortunately, it's a straight section of road, quite a straight section of road that actually goes from the city to outside the city. So you've got not just city traffic, regional district traffic coming in, you know, being straight. And I mean, I walk that road. You got to be on your toes to walk, you know, with or against the traffic there. Yeah, some people are good. It's sort of a mix of traffic from what I see out there. In terms of safety, other safety items, I wouldn't recommend speed bumps. They're a maintenance headache and a bit of a hazard in themselves.
just trying to think of
Yeah, signing it's highly overrated. Maybe.
So
yeah, you need to give an area for people to walk, right?
I've been suggesting speed bumps. And, you know, I know this is just a very simple idea, but I just see this as $125,000. I understand it's a narrow road with nowhere for people to go, but I'm curious how often it happens that two vehicles are crossing each other at the same time, also next to a pedestrian. And I just wonder if that's the best use of $125,000, or if we could put speed bumps in. And maybe speed bumps are not the greatest idea, but I just wonder if there are alternatives to this project that would be more cost efficient, so that we could spend that $125,000 or part of it on, you know, somewhere where there's a road that gets a lot more traffic and people are walking on narrow boulevards.
Right. I think on the question of cars passing, have seen it in my own travels and walking with my wife in that area. I think a lot of the public input was around kids going to school, right? So as that area gets built up, and there are more and more houses being built there, again, there'll be more kids going to the schools in the area. So yeah, it does become a safety issue.
Okay. Councillors, any other comments? Councillor Washington?
Thank you. We don't have a plan B. We don't have a less expensive plan B. There's only one way, and it's going to cost $125,000.
Yeah, there's ditches both sides of that road, so there's not much to use to build on. You have to fill it in.
Okay. Seeing no more comments, moving on. Beaver Creek widening, Pineo to Compton, additional cost for paved shoulder instead of gravel, $25,000. Are there any questions on this one? Okay. Moving on, Gertrude Street Bridge rehabilitation, Roger Creek Bridge, as I'm calling it. $200,000. Any questions on this one? Councillor Haggard?
I found some of these items very difficult to make a good decision on because I just don't have enough information besides that one line item. Like, has there been a bridge inspection report, or if it has, how long ago has it been? What's the scope of work? You know, those kinds of things. I just feel like you need a little bit more than just Gertrude Bridge, you know?
Yeah, and I guess that's part of coming in late. Yeah, the rationale. I think I went over a lot of that last year when we were talking about this. So yes, it is on the basis of a high priority work that's identified through inspections by a qualified inspector. To me, the work that needs to be done there is kind of like the leaky roof. We've got wood timbers below that are becoming punky and suspect. Steel components underneath that with the water on them, they rust. So that increases painting and anti-rust protection that needs to be done. Yeah, there's a joint in the seal that's leaking, and it requires jackhammering of concrete, and of course that, you know, traffic impacts and flagging, and so yeah, the cost, it's not a cheap project to do. There's also some other items underneath that bridge that have been recommended, like there's some riprap that's missing, so we would do that all at the same time, and some painting. Yeah.
Councillor Paulson.
So just to clarify, and just to, this really is just a portion of the long range maintenance and upgrading of that bridge over the next while. Like, that bridge probably is going to need, over the years, probably $1 million worth of work, if not more, right?
In time, absolutely, yeah. It's similar to the one that's downstream on Victoria Quay, right? You need to replace the roof. You need to replace components as they wear out or become damaged or like they rot or whatever, right? So.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, Councillor Paulson.
Just one last question on this bridge. Is that actually a project that we can get to and get done this year?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we'll tender it. We'll put a work plan together, tender it, and it'll be something that's contracted.
Okay. Thank you very much. We have line painting machine, power driver, and trailer, $12,000 coming from general. Any questions? Seeing none. Okay, thank you. And on to parks. The first one we have is parks upgrades, paper mill dam stairs, $10,000. Any questions? Safety, seeing none. Moving on to parks upgrade, Penny Lane Bridge, $20,000 coming from general. Any questions or comments on this one? Councillor Corbeil?
Is that something that has to be done this year?
Madam Mayor, it would be preferred this year, but it is not a safety issue in comparison to Paper Mill Dam and the severity. Penny Lane would be less of a priority at this stage.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Paulson, did you have your hand up?
Let's take that out of there. I'll have a motion to take the acreage out this year.
Okay. Was Councillor Haggard, did you have your hand up? No. Somebody had a hand up. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. All in favor? Carried. On to Blair Park Spray Electrical and 16th Avenue Park Spray Electrical, $15,000 each. Any questions or comments on these ones? Councillor Washington.
That'll save money, water money in the long run, won't it?
Absolutely. And from a functionality standpoint, the fact that our community can just engage themselves without contacting staff, making arrangement for keys, it would reduce the cost of both the utility and water, as well as the administrative cost to manage the ability to use that space.
Thank you. Councillor Paulson, did you have a comment?
Well, I was looking at these, and would there be any reason why we wouldn't do one park a year? One this year and one next year?
Well, my suggestion was to do the second one, and it's just because we have a park that's sitting there unused. I mean, we have a spray park in town that gets used almost never, and so I think if we have assets, kids should be using them. Councillor Poon?
If it never gets used, why do we have it anyway?
Well, it doesn't get used because kids can't turn it on. You have to go to, I don't know if it's City Hall or Echo, I assume Echo. I don't know where you get the key. I know you need a key. I think that's the reason. So people will rent it for birthday parties and things like that, but it rarely gets used. Okay. Any other questions or comments on that one? Okay, moving on. Victoria Key Shelter, $30,000, but $15,000 coming from Rotary Club and $15,000 coming from General. Any questions or comments on this one? Seeing none. Russell Field Light Pole Repair, $10,000 coming from General, and I believe we were told this one was a priority. Any questions on this one? Okay, moving on. McLean Mill Capital, $65,000. And I think, projects awaiting reports. Okay. Any questions or comments on this one? We have had now, I believe we have $60,000 or $30,000 in the budget for capital that was to match a grant.
Yeah, so Madam Mayor, so it was 60,000 was to match the other 60 from the Parks Canada cost sharing grant.
Okay, yeah. Great. And then this 65,000, we've heard in our McLean Mill report earlier tonight. I'm actually not remembering exactly what it was for. It's been a long day. Would somebody like to summarize? CAO?
Madam Mayor, just give me a sec to find that. I think it was there. I recall there was a line item in the McLean Mill Society budget submission, and my recollection is that they had subscribed the full 125,000 on capital. Let's see if that's right.
Yeah, it is in the report we had from earlier tonight.
Yes.
I'm just gonna.
So they show, McLean Mill Society shows $60,000 as a City of Port Alberni contribution to the Historic Structure Conservation Project, which is the grant matching. That is currently in our draft capital, reflected in our draft capital. And there had been a further 65 in draft capital, which Council earlier moved to the options list, which you're looking at right now. And McLean Mill Society shows that in their capital, that 65 for historic and contemporary assets. So the McLean Mill Society budget reflects 125,000 for capital, and currently our budget reflects 60.
So do we have a clear picture of what that 65,000 would actually go toward?
I don't recall what Dr. Morton told us.
Okay. I think we rushed him through that part because we were getting toward the end of our meeting, so we might not have gotten a full explanation. Council, I would suggest that we wait on allocating that, and if we want to consider allocating it, that we ask for more information on specifically what it would be going toward out there. Okay. And I don't think that this one was actually added in at our last meeting. I think it's on there just because of a report, so
Madam
I
Mayor,
don't,
it had been in the draft capital plan.
But we took it out.
Council took it out and put it on the options list for further consideration.
but most of everything else that's on here is already added into the budget from our last meeting, and I think
Yeah.
this one, we don't need a motion to take it out at this point because
I
it
think
wasn't
you're correct.
added in.
That's correct.
Okay. Moving on to Parks, Recreation, and Facilities. We have the Gyro Center security cameras, $10,000. Seeing nothing? Yep. Glenwood Center ride-on floor scrubber, $9,000. And these are all coming from general. We have alarm panels at heritage facilities. And this one, I think that we had indicated I think we didn't put this one in our budget. We had asked for it to be taken out of McLean Mill budget.
Madam Mayor, my records show that it was in, but I could be wrong.
I could be wrong also, but I don't think I am.
Wanted it separated into each, like if it was McLean Mill, put it in McLean Mill budget, if it was
Yes.
wherever else, it would
Okay.
go in that budget.
Yeah.
I think we did want it separated.
Okay. Okay. I think we wanted it done regardless.
Sure. And Madam Mayor, I'll remind
That's right.
council that 65,000 from the draft capital for McLean Mill has been moved out of the draft capital plan.
Okay.
So we shouldn't, I don't think we should kid ourselves that we can afford that with the money that's in the budget. We just don't have money in the budget for that.
I think that's good advice.
Thanks.
Thank you. We have the Echo Fieldhouse Furnace number 1, $6,600. Any questions or comments? Okay, we have Multiplex Parks Yard Genie Lift, $55,000. Councillor Corbeil.
Could somebody convince me that the yard genie is needed for this year? I assume it's a worthy project, but trying to cut a few bucks off of the budget's becoming a little difficult.
Madam Mayor, I'll remind you of the information that's provided and whatever the will of council shall be. So at our previous budget discussion, I recapped that we had in scissor lift rentals for the 2017-2018 period, we had spent $9,200 in lift rentals over the past year and a half. And then in the previous 2 weeks to that budget meeting, we'd actually spent over $2,500 for bucket trucks with our electrician. So it's just essentially costing out or the cost comparison between renting over the coming years versus purchasing. So as far as a priority, again, it's the will of council. This unit would be projected to last 20 years, and it is a used unit. So a new unit would cost in excess of $80,000.
So is this something that if we wait till next year, that used unit's going to be sold to some other community?
It's difficult to say at this stage. So my recommendation would be council sort of determining that cost benefit or the return on the investment of spending the upfront versus over the course of time. There would be an opportunity as well for us to utilize as a revenue generation tool as well to provide an operator and the unit for rent for special events as well. Difficult to say at this stage what kind of revenue that might generate, but another item to consider.
Okay, any further comments on this one? Councillor Kuhn?
So can we remove it?
We
Can I
could
make
have
the
a
motion?
vote on removing it. Okay, hearing a motion to remove it. Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Any comments on that? Councillor Haggard?
Do you mean remove it or just delay it till following year to look at?
I mean, delay it to next year.
Okay, any other comments on this one? I feel personally, although I don't like the $55,000, I feel like this is a good use of $55,000 given what we typically spend or what we have spent on rentals and the potential for renting it out and generating revenue on this. So I'm going to oppose this motion personally. All in favor of removing it and opposed? And the tie vote is a defeated vote. So even though you didn't have a majority, you still lose. phone in Cindy for another vote. Thank you, Council. Moving on to the Johnston Road planter box installation, $20,000. Any comments on this one? Okay, moving on. We have the Aquatic Center accessibility lift. I don't think anyone's going to take that out. RCMP building temporary exhibit lockers, $10,000. Any questions or comments? Seeing none. Tree planting program. Anyone want to touch my trees? I'm hearing none personally, but. Oh, and I will remind everyone that we are applying for a grant to match that tree program, so. Fireworks show, $10,000. That one's highlighted, says awaiting report. I think it is possibly awaiting myself and Cindy bringing it to the regional district, which we have not had an opportunity to do yet. So we will, you can continue to wait for us. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a bit of history on this. Back in the day when you probably weren't even born and I was a lot younger, the Salmon Festival on itself hosted the fireworks show at Salmon Festival every Labor Day weekend. In the early 2000s, none of us can remember, we were approached by Quality Foods and they wanted to take over our fireworks display, which they did probably early 2000s, say 2003, and to which they hosted the show, they paid for the show, they virtually did everything. So our pyrotechnics let their license lapse, our storage facility was let go because we used to buy it, store it, and set it all off ourselves. My thoughts after hearing about this is that with Quality Foods recently being sold, I'm thinking the new owners went through and said, oh my, we're giving this away to Port Alberni, and that's the reason why they approached Mr. Deacon for it. So if it's not in the books for Salmon Festival, I'm sure we can find a new sponsor for that if Quality Foods doesn't want to play with Salmon Festival anymore. But it's nothing to sweat over, because I'm sure we'll find the money somehow to put on that show.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Paulson.
Just a comment and follow up on new sponsors and stuff. For Canada 150, I found 3 $5,000 sponsors that were partners, but they made it very clear that it was a one-time deal. Mm-hmm. So it's tough to find a long-term, 10-year, 20-year sponsor, but maybe I could help.
Mm-hmm. I think this is a valid ask for us to take to the regional district. The regional district does have, an events fund, and this is something that brings value to the entire region. People come from all over the Alberni Valley to watch the fireworks and to go to Salmon Fest. So I do think that this is a worthwhile ask and a good cause. Councillor Paulson.
Councillor Washington. Is the indication that Quality Foods wants right out of this, or is this to supplement their sponsorship?
It was news to me when Mr. Deacon brought it up.
Okay,
so
sorry.
They've not approached us. They haven't approached the Salmon Festival.
So far from, we were singled out, but in a way that Quality Foods said we are the only community on Vancouver Island that is not contributing to the fireworks now. They say that every other community is, and the cost has gone up because they're also choreographing the fireworks with music. That's in part the justification that was brought forward, along with the fact that we're the only community that aren't contributing to it anymore. So to get at what you're looking for.
Yeah, no, I guess my whole thinking is Quality Foods is really active in Nanaimo, Parksville, Qualicum, and I'm just wondering what the deal is. And you explained that there is community partnership along with Quality Foods now in probably all of those communities. Yeah, thank you.
I think going forward with the request to the regional district, we could ask them for a breakdown of the costs.
Sure. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to give you some more ammunition, so to speak, about the Salmon Festival, you can also remind the regional district that the Salmon Festival played an integral part for the walking bridge that goes across at the marina, and also the Salmon Festival paid Babe Gunn to do the sculpture that's your focal point at Harbor Key. The fish sculpture in there was all bought and paid for by the Salmon Festival too, so
For sure.
they do contribute to the community.
Absolutely. Okay. Okay, moving on. We have the 3 items that we've added to our options list to consider adding into the agenda. The first 2 are to do with cruise ships, 13,250 and 22,500. Council? Any questions or comments? Councillor Paulson.
Well, I'm just looking at the cruise ship ask, and I mean, the cruise ships are coming. This expense makes sense to me. I would suspect that the revenue generated from cruise ships, whether it be with local people supporting local merchants as well as people from the cruise ships, it's not just about the cruise ships, but I would suspect that the economic impact is way north of $13,000. Like I would suspect that each one of those cruise ships is probably, no, I'm not even going to guess, but I would say that it's probably 10 times that amount.
Mm-hmm. Councillor Haggard?
Can we take the funds that we receive from the Community Forestry Legacy Fund and put that towards the refurbishment of Harbor Key?
That's a great question. I don't see why we couldn't consider doing that. CAO?
Madam Mayor, my recollection is that the restriction on those funds is they be used for the good of the Alberni Valley. I guess the case would have to be made and other stakeholders convinced that that was, in fact, that expenditure was in line with that. We also are not permitted to use it for city expenses. So is maintaining our infrastructure a city expense? I think some would argue it is.
I would argue that improving the Harbor Key, I could see a portion of this not really being eligible for that, but I would argue that improving the Harbor Key benefits this entire valley. Again, this is, I mean, the Harbor Key is the area that everybody in the valley comes to. So yeah, I would see it that way. Certainly some may not.
I would suggest, Madam Mayor, if council wants to consider this, that you ask staff for a report and the Director of Finance could look into it and give you advice.
Okay, be great. Councillor Poon? Okay. Councillor Haggard, would you like to, do you want to make a motion for a report on it?
I will make that motion to request a report.
Okay, I will second that. Are there any comments or questions? All in favor? Carried. Multiplex dust collector. Councillor Paulson?
I'd like to make the motion that we put that in.
I'll second. And that's $2,400. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Carried. Okay, so that takes us to the end of our options list. And for council's awareness, we have taken out $70,000 and added in $2,400. That probably brings us down to a 4.2% increase to the average home or something like that. Council, there has been discussion around going through the 2019 capital budget. I know some of you have asked questions about the operational budget. Are you wanting to go through the capital budget line by line as a start? Do you have further direction to give staff for information you would like? Councillor Corbeil?
Madam Mayor, might it not be prudent to ask the directors to maybe go back and see if they can't come back to council with some savings, if there's something that they feel that could be held over till next year, it would be greatly appreciated.
Are you meaning generally for every director or for specific departments?
Well, I'm thinking all directors to take a look and see if there isn't something that could be put off until 2020.
I think it's a very difficult ask to make, given that we've kind of been reducing every single year to maintain our 1% budget direction. That doesn't mean that we can't do it for sure. I think it's just not going to be easy to find specific savings, especially generally. CAO, do you want to comment on that?
Madam Mayor, I respect the intent of the question. Rather than council starting to delve into the operational budget, you're asking staff to try and do that first and bring those forward, and we can do that. It would help if council gave us direction on the areas in the operating budget that you want us to look. Having said that, maybe we need to look broadly first, and we'll come back to you with any recommendations. And if that's not where council, if that doesn't satisfy council, then you can start to be more directive in terms of where you want to look. How does that sound?
Sure. And, you know, I know that I've personally heard the comment from people on council that we, especially new councillors, don't know enough about the budget to really even know where to request to look. And I think that's an uncomfortable position to be in as a councillor. You know, really trying to not get too involved in the operational ongoings of the city, but still trying to get to a budget point that we all feel comfortable with. I think there's a general consensus here that we don't feel comfortable with the over 4% increase to the average taxpayer, with really, I would say, you know, no strategic initiatives advanced, because we don't have those yet. So I sort of look at it personally and say, if we're at 4% of a tax increase this year, why are we even building a strategic plan? Because there's going to be no money to, you know, to advance our strategic plan. So it's a difficult position to be in as a councillor, really not knowing where to look and not, yeah. Sure.
If I may, Madam Mayor, the city is in a position as an organization where, and you heard this afternoon from Mr. Kalenda saying that for a city to not have budget increases or taxation increases, that we need to develop, right? We need to grow. And this, as you know, the city hasn't been growing as fast, or hasn't been growing, and we want it to grow. So we're in a situation where over the previous years, we have decreased our ability to maintain infrastructure because more and more of our budget has been eaten up by maintaining the services that we provide. And now we're in a position, as you see, where if we want to maintain all the services that we currently provide, which we value, for every service there's a stakeholder group that values it. To do that, we need to increase taxes beyond the point of inflation, which is what's staring you in the face right now. So this is a very difficult spot to be in. One, we need growth, so that growth pays for the increase in costs. In the absence of growth, we need to think about balancing tax increase. You need to think about balancing tax increases with strategic reductions in services that we value. And that's what you've asked us to do, is come back with reductions in service. Because there will not be, other than being able to put off a cost for, 10 more months and bring it back next year. If we bring you back anything, it will be, anything substantial will be a reduction in service. And there will be a user group that values that service. This is the tight spot we're in. So I can appreciate the challenge council's facing.
And I will add to my somewhat negative comment that, while we may all be somewhat uncomfortable with the budget as it is right now, I think that there is good in this budget. We have spent a very good amount of our options list on infrastructure projects. And I think that there's certainly a consensus on council and among staff that these projects are important projects. We need to maintain the assets that we have in our community. And then, of course, we're investing. We've reversed the change with the RCMP, and we're investing in more efficiency there as well. So I don't want to sound like I think it's all bad. It's just a challenging budget to be a part of. Councillor Poon.
I just don't really understand how our current projects lists contribute to growth. They just seem very run-of-the-mill projects to me.
I think that's a rhetorical question. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Haggard?
If it's very difficult to reduce operating costs because we'd be forced to reduce services, is there anything in our budget, and I can't think of anything specific, any capital projects that we might be able to cut instead of reducing services?
Madam Mayor, it's not 9 o'clock yet. We can look at capital right now if you want. Staff are in the room. There's not a lot of general revenue that goes to capital, as you'll see.
Yeah, there are minimal, but we certainly can go through the capital budget for 2019.
Look at you, hard copy.
Yeah, I know, I don't normally go hard copy because it takes so long to get anywhere. So that begins on page 44. Okay, so we'll just go through them maybe one by one, and I think we'll go through them. Council will see that a lot of these do not come out of general revenue, so they won't affect our tax rate. And we need to be looking at the whole picture, because whether it's being funded this year out of general revenue or funded over time out of IRF, it's still tax dollars being spent, but just so that there's that awareness. So the first one, 2019, under administration, mapping and GIS software. Is that the 65,600? It's on a line up.
Yeah, I see it as 65,600 coming from IRF.
Okay. And then we've got the asset management plan implementation software. See, there's two amounts there, but the lines don't line up. So what's the 13,000?
I see, yeah, and the 13,000 I think is the asset management plan coming from gas taxes, but you're right, they don't line up,
Okay.
just in the spreadsheet.
Okay. Council,
right?
any
Is that right, Kathy?
questions?
Yeah, the 65 is the computer and server evergreening,
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
and the asset management plan implementation is a placeholder for that, so we don't lose track of that 550,000 roughly.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Council, any questions or comments on these ones? Okay. Moving on, in the fire department, we have fire hall structural prep for ladder truck number 2 replacement, 88,000, and that is coming from gas tax. Any questions on this one? Okay, we have replace portable radios and replace pagers, 35,000 and 20,000. Those are both coming from general. And I think those are needs right now. Replace fire hall generator, $60,000, and this is coming from IRF, carried forward from 2018. Okay, stop me if you have questions. Under transportation, we have a number of projects, none of them coming from operating, and then quite a few that have been moved out to a further year. Then under paving and road construction, we have the Beaver Creek Road widening, Pineo to Compton, $55,000, with $30,000 coming from gas tax, $25,000 coming from other, which I believe is what we added into our options list, the $25,000. Then we have 16th Avenue, Bird Street, for $150,000 coming from gas tax. Any questions or comments on any of those? And then a number of projects being moved to future years. Under storm, we have small capital main replacements, $100,000, with $50,000 coming from general and $50,000 from gas tax. Questions? No. And then 16th Avenue, Bird Street, $110,000. Okay, works other, we have a number of projects. McLean Mill water quality coming from general. I would suggest we keep that money in there, although I know we have had conversations about moving it. At this point, I think we need to leave it in there until we finish our testing, because, oh, actually, that might be the money for the testing.
Madam Mayor, that's the money for testing and for dam remediation, and I can bring you a report hopefully for next week, Monday, with some documentation from the dam inspector.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Moving down, we have McLean Mill Capital Projects, $30,000. That's what we left in the budget for the grant matching, and it does say 60,000 here, and I think that's because 29,900 comes from the regional district. Okay. And moving further down, we have Bob Daly supports, $100,000 coming from general. We have the multiplex ice chiller, $50,000, and $155,000 coming from gas tax, $125,000 coming from carbon trust. I'm wondering if this $50,000 from general we would be able to take from the carbon trust now that it's not allocated for the solar project. Okay, so if we wanted to, council, we could take that one from carbon trust, $50,000. Is there a desire to do that? Seeing one? Okay, I will make that motion. All in favor? Carried. So that's another $50,000, not really saved.
No,
but
spent.
But spent for sure. That's right. Well spent, important project.
But between the vehicle and this, we've used that up.
That's right. Moving down the line, for projects coming out of general, we have the multiplex, replace the walk-in cooler, $40,000. We've heard quite a bit of background on that one. And then we have fitness studio cardio equipment replacement, $10,000. Any questions or comments? Councillor Corbeil?
Just a question on the lights. Again, that's coming out of the carbon trust. So even if we put that off till next year, it wouldn't make any difference in this budget, would it?
Where are you? Lights? Oh, okay, yeah. LED lights, $110,000. Yeah, so those are already coming out of carbon trust.
So, okay.
And I would imagine those will have a payback at some point anyways. So if they're not coming from general revenue, I would suggest we do them to get the payback.
Okay.
Councillor Poon?
What's the rationale behind replacing the cardio equipment?
Director Thorpe?
Madam Mayor, it's standard replacement at this stage of, it would just be typical replacement of equipment.
So these are like weights and things like that?
No,
they don't lose weight over time, right?
Correct. So the cardio equipment, Madam Mayor, would be our ellipticals, treadmills, that sort of thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's not fixed weights, it's machines, essentially. And if I may, if we can go backward to the Weyerhaeuser lighting, I believe at a previous budget meeting, my suggestion was to retain $10,000 to for a study, essentially, or to design and cost and determine the final allocation or what the final cost would be for the LED lighting, and to withhold the $100,000 until we know exactly what that cost might look like.
So I think if that's that $110,000 is in the budget, I think that would give you the direction to do it in whatever way makes the most sense. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions or comments on those?
Madam Mayor, if I may, the Director of Finance has just informed me that we have $37,500 unallocated gas taxes. So if council would like, we can find an eligible project where we can displace some general revenue with that gas tax funds. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I would imagine that there's enough projects to choose from.
So we can make that change in the next iteration of the budget.
Okay. Council is, everybody approves of that? Okay. Thank you. Moving down, waterworks, none of these are coming from general. They come from our water and sewer systems. We have gone through these projects. Are there any additional questions or comments on any of these? Okay. On to page 47, 2020. So we have gone through the 2020 projects. That's all for the 2019 capital projects. Councillor, is there any?
Kind of
this effort?
Well, the reality is they are all important projects. So, you know, this is, yeah, it's not a fun process to go through. Why did we ever run for these positions? Just kidding. Kidding. Okay, so we've gone through the capital budget. I think that we haven't given official direction to the CAO for staff to come back and make any further recommendations. Is there a will on council for us to ask staff if there are additional places that they would suggest making changes? Or are we satisfied with where we're at right now until our next budget meeting, if we have one? Councillor Corbeil?
I would ask staff or the directors to go back and see if they can find some efficiencies, and when we come to the next budget meeting, hopefully we can get a little bit closer to a 3% increase in taxes.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Okay. Are there any questions or comments? So CAO?
If I may, Madam Mayor, staff are not offended by that direction, so you shouldn't feel reluctant to pass that.
Thank you.
Nothing ventured, nothing gained, so.
Okay. Okay, all in favor then? Carried. So I would say that brings us to the end of our budget discussion for this evening, with the exception of public input. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak? None? Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I'm not sure if we have another budget meeting scheduled at this point or not. City Clerk?
We don't, Madam Mayor, but I have a suggested date.
Wonderful. What would it be?
March the 4th. We have no meetings currently scheduled on Monday, March the 4th, so I would suggest an afternoon meeting on that date.
Okay. Okay. Councillor Corbeil?
Madam Mayor, I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time to bring this up, but there was an email sent to mayor and council. I don't think it was sent to staff at all, from a city resident questioning the inequity of the city residents paying for parks, recreation, and heritage. I'm wondering if staff could, without spending a lot of time and definitely a lot of money, come back with a bit of a report that gives us some sort of indication on a breakdown of how parks and recreation and heritage is divvied up between the regional district and the city residents.
Do you mean for the users or for how it's funded?
How it's funded, how the taxes are broken down.
Okay, I think we would have that information pretty reasonably or pretty easily, I think.
But I'd also be curious to know if anybody has any indication on, is it 10% of people that use the facilities are from outside the city? Is it 20%? Is it 50%? And I don't know if those numbers are available. Yeah. I think they could be.
That might be a bigger ask. Director Thorpe, do you mind commenting on how available that information is?
Madam Mayor, the only challenge I see at this stage is with the new implementation of our new recreation software that came available. I'm looking at, in order to pull historical figures, looking at multiple pieces of software and seeing how far back the reports might go. But if it's the will of council, of course, we'll pull that information.
Okay. I wonder if we need this information during budget time, given that we probably it probably won't change. Probably won't change this year. So I would very much like to see that information, especially as we do continue trying to work forward with the regional district. But I would suggest we might not, we have a lot going on during budget time right now as it is. We might not need it as a priority like for our next budget meeting. Okay. Okay. So we will note that for future. Okay. Okay. Any further questions? Would somebody like to move adjournment?
So So moved, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. Oh.